Hello, and welcome to another episode of Third Chances. I had the privilege to meet one of the smartest people to talk about health and the newest technologies that activate the doctor within, Dr. Lee Ostler. He is a cosmetic, restorative, and family dentist in Richland, Washington. In his private practice, he took a special approach to treat chronic gum diseases known to be linked with heart disease, cognitive decline, diabetes, and other common medical issues. Graduate from University of Washington Dental School in Seattle, he was always interested in science, research, and connecting the dots. He is a founder and past president of the American Academy for Oral Systemic Health and authored numerous books on this subject. His 40 years dental expertise focused on connection of the health of mouth and body, dental reconstructions, facial pain and headaches, TMJ therapy, as well as sleep apnea solutions. Dr. Ostler first heard the term redox when his wife's lifelong health struggles seemed to be running out of options, and one of her doctors that he respected suggested he gets her some redox signaling molecules. Dr. Ostler never heard of it and didn't get any further explanation, but he trusted the doctor for years, so he did some search and purchased the redox technology. Witnessing what started happening with his wife almost immediately caught his attention and desire to dig deep into the science. Not just ASEA company's own research available at the time, but what other research was done in this field, in this new field of science, to better understand what was happening and how it was even possible. At the first time I met with Dr. Lee Ostler in 2022 in Las Vegas, he wrote 2 books based on his personal extensive research named Redox Matters, Connecting the Dots Between Redox Biology and Health. By the time we recorded this interview, he already had another book called Healthy Matters, Applying the Redox Lifestyle. As a busy doctor with his private practice, he is incredibly productive in his free time as well. So today, while still practicing dentistry, he published another 2 books called Why It Matters and Progress Matters. He became a redox educator and volunteers on the ASEA Medical Professional Board. Every Friday, he also co-hosts a video series ASEA 5, where they discuss with other medical professionals and scientists everything about redox, the newest research, and how it is relevant to anyone who pursue longevity and healthy living. If you ever wanted to understand what this is and how it could help, there is no other person I know who spent years researching the subject, connecting the dots, publishing about it, on top of his own personal experiences. So it is my privilege to be able to speak with Dr. Ostler, and here are some of the most interesting moments of my interview with him. We were just talking about how does a dentist become a research enthusiast and a science nerd.
Late 80s, early 90s, there was some new research coming out showing that there was an interesting linkage or connection with the health of the mouth and the rest of the body. And I remember thinking at first, it's like, well, if this is true, if the health of my mouth affects general health conditions such as heart disease, diabetes, and brain neurodegenerative issues and so forth, then I should be working more closely with physicians, and they should be working more closely with me. And that set me on probably a 15-year, maybe even 20-year path of investigating this kind of new concept inside healthcare, literally.
Mm-hmm.
And long story short is I affiliated with a group of health professionals in the Midwest. And when they saw what I was doing privately, they invited me to be a part of that. And we co-founded the American Academy for Oral Systemic Health. And so I began doing some research. And I just went to the literature, the PubMed government databases because we didn't have any good research that was out there that showed cause and effect. It was just all this, low-level linkages. And anyway, you stitch together 1,000 or 2,000 of these articles, and you come away with a preponderance of evidence type of a conclusion that there has to be a connection. And in the early days, it was really hard to make the point unless you could kind of dogpile and just really have multiple sources. And so I wrote those together, and I created bibliographies and condensed them into books, making the argument that the health of the mouth and the health of the body are connected. We're not trained that way professionally. We have these silos that we are in, and even the insurance side, health insurance or medical insurance and dental insurance are two separate, different, third-party payer systems. And so there's this poor recognition across the disciplines, and what that effectively has done over the decades, if not century, is it has taken the mouth outside the body in terms of healthcare. And so there's two separate disciplines. I guess if we could do it all over again, we'd make dentistry a specialty of medicine. By rights, that's kind of how the body's organized, but that's not the way it has played out. So anyway, I gained some great research experience in researching and writing and making arguments for why what seems obvious is in fact I believe is the truth. And that set me on a course where I was invited into this group. I was almost immediately appointed the president and put on the executive board, and basically ran the organization literally out of my own office, answering the phones and whatnot for probably a good year or two, until we could get it up and running well enough that we could move the headquarters to Chicago. And since then, I've passed the baton. I'm a past president. I'm not on the executive board anymore. I'm an advisory board member of that. But that whole experience was a great learning experience. It was a great experience builder in how to connect people and how to talk to people and how to speak in public and how to do rigorous research or examination of the literature. And that has proven helpful as I've become introduced to ASEA and redox biology, because that was right out of the gate. That was, the questions I was asking is like, what is this and how does this work? And I needed to prove to myself, at least, that this was a legitimately grounded, scientifically based, idea that we have redox signaling molecules that promote health. And so, all of that being said, the 15, 20 years I've spent, in the other arena, which I'm still in, that's just, what it prepared me to, I think, better look at what this was. Plus my, my undergraduate focus was in biochemistry and physiology, and that was a good grounding in terms of how the body and how the cell works as well.
But that's interesting, because you put so much work and effort, and it's admirable, because not everybody would be willing to put so much time into helping fellow dentists to actually make the connection like you did. But even though you were into biology and biochemistry and you were really scientific nerd kind of, you have never heard of redox until it was introduced to in very unconventional situation in your private life. Could you please talk about that? Because I was fascinated by your story, and it involves your wife.
Yes. Yes, that was, I was not expecting this. I was not looking for it. My wife has had some unique health challenges for probably 4 decades. And we've literally been, it seems, everywhere, at least in the Northwest of the country here, looking for solutions, both conventionally, alternatively, self-help. We just kind of looked at everything. And at one point we were sitting in her doctor's appointment, and I remember making the comment that she seems to be plateauing, like, what else can we do? we've kind of seemed to have tried everything. She's had, a number of surgeries, and anyway, he recommended that we get her on redox signaling molecules. And my side of the story is I remember looking at him. This is an incredibly astute physician. He's an MD, has a PhD in pharmacological research, spent 6 years in, doing research, and then came back into internal medicine and private practice for many years. And so I really respected what he was doing and was thankful for his help. But I remember looking at him and saying, well, what is redox signaling molecules? And he said, well, just go Google it and get some.
Wow.
And I said, okay, but what is redox signaling? And he goes, just go Google it and get some. And that was literally the end of the conversation. And I remember kind of shrugging and thinking, oh, okay, I guess I'm going to go find it.
How long ago was this happening?
This was in the end of 2018.
Oh, so there wasn't much information anyway.
There wasn't a whole lot of stuff. You're right. Anyway, I found someone that had a site. I didn't know what I was looking for. I was just Googling. I was just internet searching, and I said, this looks like what he was talking about. And I ordered some and started doing some, poking around and researching this. But the kicker was, after we got it, it was about 48 hours later, and my wife just kind of, it's like she came alive. She just woke up. She was a different person. It was stunning, and it was more so stunning because I know what the last 4 decades have been like. And this was demonstrably different. It was clearly, this wasn't just a fluke. So that caught my attention. I remember texting him back, the physician, and I think I said something like, you would not believe what's happening. And his response was one word with a question mark, and it was, really? It was like, but I think he was surprised. And we met with him.
It took him so long.
Right. Well, he wasn't really involved. I think this was just, he was kind of scratching his head. He was at the bottom of the barrel. He wasn't quite sure where to go with her, and bless his heart. But that was the start of his earnest investigation, because afterwards he goes, wow, that really convinced me to, your wife's experience, to take a look at this. So I went away from that experience, and all this stuff that I'd been doing in the past kicked in. And I'm like, I got to figure out what this is. Well, as it turned out, the week that this was all happening, we were having in Las Vegas, our annual scientific session for AASH, the American Academy for Oral Systemic Health. Mm-hmm. It was going to be a dual meeting with the American College for the Advancement of Medicine. We were looking how to join forces with the medical side, and how to bridge the gap, between the two disciplines, and also save money and have a common meeting, under the same roof at the same time, and be more financially, fiscally responsible in how we did our meetings. Anyway, I thought, well, that was the Friday later that week, and so I got online because I thought I wasn't in charge of the meeting this year, and so I thought before I showed up, I should probably figure out who's speaking and kind of what the agenda was, who the vendors were going to be, so I didn't show up and embarrass myself. I mean, this organization had my fingerprints all over it, and I didn't even know who was going to be speaking. So as I was looking at the vendor list, the exhibitors that would be at the meeting, I saw ASEA was listed as an exhibitor. And I'm like, wow, we just had this experience from my physician and this blue bottle stuff, and now they're at my meeting and I didn't even know about it. I'm just like, I'm incredulously curious now. So I noticed that the person who was the contact person for the ASEA exhibit was Dr. Maureen Hayes.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know her. I had an email address, so I sent an email to her, just kind of shooting blindly in the dark, thinking, I'm looking forward to meeting you. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this. Maybe you can help me understand why this just happened with my wife. Her response was, I'd be glad to talk, but it won't be Friday because I'm going to be in London. My husband's a physician, stem cell researcher. He has some pig lungs up on the space station, and he's going to be getting an award in London, so I can't be there.
Oh.
like thinking, who are these people? I didn't know anything else, but it's like, this is, it was kind of weird. But she said, but that there'll be some other people on our team, some other physicians that will be at the meeting, and you can speak with them and they'll tell you whatever you want to know. So I showed up at the meeting and spoke with some of the physicians that were there. And then I came away from that just highly impressed. I could see what was happening. There were some speakers in the medical side of the conference who would stand up in front of the room and talk about these principles. They couldn't speak the name of the company from the stage, obviously, but they would say things like, go talk to the people in the back of the room and they'll answer your questions. And I was really moved. I was really enlightened. And I went home and I started doing the deep dive because I guess I have a unique form of brain damage, I guess. It's like I have to know how electrons move around from molecule to molecule. I needed to know the science. I needed to know it was legitimate. And so I did the same thing again, like I'd done, in the last 10 years with this oral systemic thing. And I just dove into the redox biology and I found out that it was a thing. I started building, I take notes by just accumulating bibliographies abstracts and summaries so that I can like put it all in one document. And as I was talking with various physicians about it, in some measure to curiously find out what they knew, so to add, but they kept saying, well, let me have your bibliography. In fact, why don't you just put it all into a book so I can read that and I don't have to do all my own research. Anyway, it triggered that because that's what I've done several times, with other books. And what came out of that after a couple of years was the Redox Matters. And then in writing that, I realized that just talking about the science itself and how cells think, the rules of the cell, didn't really talk about how it applies to normal people and normal lifestyles. And that's where I developed this idea that what we're really talking about here is a redox lifestyle. We look at ASEA as being what we call a biohack, is something that we can consume that hacks our metabolic pathways. But more importantly, we need to be understanding that the way our cells work is that it's simply obeying the rules of the cell. These rules of how our cells function already exist. We were designed this way. And we're just kind of coming at it rather directly, I might add, with ASEA, with what you could term a biohack or a solution which starts in motion biological events that support and maintain health. That's the essence of it. And so then Healthy Matters, I wrote that from the standpoint of this is the lifestyle. And there's actually a lot of things we can do in our lifestyle that support these very same pathways, and which you will come across all the time as you're out and about. We're all very familiar with those lifestyle factors, but nobody really understands why they work. They just know if you eat right, you'll be healthy, or if you exercise, that you'll be healthier. And we just take that on its face value. Of course, if I exercise and eat right and reduce my stress and sleep right, I'm going to be a healthier person. But not very many people can explain to you how they work or why they work, And so that's really what these two books and the research that was involved in them allowed me to conclude, or to discover for myself at least, and write about, was the rules of the cell and how this blends with those rules to reach these endpoints.
For this, and then you had a private research at your own home, because you have been watching what was happening with your wife and with her health, which is like first-hand private one-person research. Did you take the Redox yourself at that time?
Yeah, after about a week, when I saw what it was doing for her, I thought, I wonder what it would do for me. We made the order. We ordered some extra amount because I started thinking on the side, it's like, well, if it's good for me, it might be good for my patients. I could share it with them. So I ordered a bunch. So I had it there and I thought, well, I'm going to start taking this. And, I'm already starting to get kind of an intellectual understanding of this, but I didn't have a personal experience. I'm actually rather healthy overall. And so I didn't really expect much.
Mhm.
Um, but I noticed within a few days, certainly within about a week to 10 days, that I was thinking clearly. My mentation was sharp. My thoughts were pointed. My sleep improved. My bathroom stool, the poop, it said it was different. I could tell a difference, and I just felt better.
Mhm.
And that was about the extent of it. And I'll continue that story and fast forward about 18 months. Now it's at this time March of 2020, and COVID hits,
Yeah.
and the pandemic shuts my business down. The governor signed a piece of paper,
Right.
along with many other states, governors, where I, as a health practitioner, was not allowed to see patients, and so we were shut down for 2 months. One of the side stories for me is as a dentist who is, bending over at sitting at the dental chair.
Right.
After all these years, I'm starting to have pain in my back and my arm and my hand. A lot of discomfort. Mm-hmm. And numbness as well. And I thought, well, I'm going to be out of work. I'm going to go see the spine surgeon, and I'm sure he can just kind of go in there and roto-root a few places that are maybe calcified and, take the pinch away and fix my problem. And I'll be back to work when they say that we're going to be back to work in May. So I went in and he said, well, that's not going to happen because I'm going to have my own hip replaced while I'm down. So I'm not doing any surgery. And he said, besides, after they did all the evaluation, you're going to have about 7 or 8 or 9 levels that will be fused and you won't go back to work.
Oh, for God's
So I'm like, okay, this is the best news. And so I remember listening to Jim Glenn's story. He's one of my fellow co-hosts on the CF5 Friday night webcast. And his story, that was echoing in my mind about how he, when he started, he really kind of he boosted his amounts, and within 3 or 4 months, he noticed that all of his back discomfort was remarkably better. He's off his medications, and you can hear him speak about this, in other places. But that was echoing. I thought, well, I've been taking 2 ounces twice a day for 18 months. I'll up it to 4 ounces twice a day. I'll double it like he did. And I'll just see what happened. Within about 5 days, literally 99% of my back discomfort and all of the altered sensations were just gone. I mean,
even the numbness that
they were gone. There was like, I won't say zero, but it was like 99+%. It was different. That was my story. I realized that I just had not been taking enough. I needed to. I never considered myself as the sick person who needed it, right?
Yeah.
And so, but when I did that, and I found out that I have a sweet spot that's just a little bit more than the normal maintenance dose. And I'll say that probably at a 95, maybe even 97% level, I've been able to maintain that, even though some days when I don't really take a full 8 ounces, maybe it's 6 or 5 or whatever, but that was what changed for me. And so my story now is, in my mind, valid, but up to that point, it was all about my wife. I had witnessed something, and we do this sometimes because we discount our own situations. We say, yeah, I can suffer. I'm okay. I'm still healthy. But when we see a family member or a good friend and where they were at, and all of a sudden it is now demonstrably different, it's like you can't deny that. You're not going to sit there and call them a liar. It's like, it's real. And so that's part of the conversion. So for me, there was this experiential side. There's also this academic side, and they met. Yeah. Where I now know the science. I can talk circles around anybody about the Redox biology. Nobody has the drop on me. And so on that, so that's settled. But now the experience side, the feeling side, the gut side, it's like, wow, um, I'm in.
Something. So I would like to ask you, because I have heard you many times speaking so fantastically clear about what that thing we are talking about actually is. I have heard you on the CF5, and many times I was like, I wish I recorded it somehow, because you have such a clear way to explain this. And I can imagine somebody may listen to this podcast that never heard of it, don't understand what we are even talking about. Is it a medication? Is it a supplement? What the hell is it? You have this gift to be able to say it simply enough to understand what it does in the body, and to answer another question that many people that I meet have. Well, it worked for you, but I don't know if it's going to work for me. What we are talking about, what the redox signaling molecules actually are.
Well, I'd be happy to. And if anybody wants to do the deeper dive, all those recordings that you were talking about are hosted on redoxmatters.com. There's a video section, and there's hundreds of videos there. You can just sort your way through those or listen to them in the background, and you'll come across those times when we do talk that way. I guess to start with, to answer your question, everybody, when they try to answer this, including myself, tends to speak too deeply about it, and we lose people. And
it's so complex. Yeah,
it's very complex. To me, it's very simple and straightforward, obviously, but when I go there, I can quickly lose people. So if there are physicians or dentists or biologists or whatever in the audience listening to this, I assure you there's deeper stuff. We can go deep as you want. But let me just say it this way. I'll start from a functional approach to this, and then we can talk about a little bit of the chemistry if you want. But functionally, think of maybe 5 bullet points. These are tiny molecules. These are nanoparticle, really tiny molecules that are quickly absorbed. We don't even though we're swallowing them, we're not digesting them. These are immediately absorbed, and they get into the body, not just through the bloodstream, but their effect is a cascading domino type effect through the whole body. And they affect what we call regulatory switches. You can just think of them as on-off switches that manage or control in a universal way, control the functions of the body that allow us to respond to stress. And that stress isn't just like, oh, my kids are driving me crazy, the schoolwork is bugging me kind of stress. That could be included. But I'm speaking biological stress, physiological related stress. So we're talking about levels of oxidation in the cell, inflammation. That's how stress shows up, that the kind that produces disease, right? So just think of it that way, as these are tiny molecules rapidly absorbed that cascade through the body, and they affect these on and off regulatory switches that help us respond to stress. You just described what redox signaling molecules are. Now, to speak of them more functionally, the best way is, I think, a metaphor or an analogy of thinking of the thermostat on the wall in your house. This thing on the wall called the thermostat has a relay in it that switches on a machine that pumps warm air into your house until the temperature in this thermostat relay box reaches the preset balance level. So when it's now warmed and it's normal, we'll call that balance. In the cell, we would call it homeostasis. But when it hits that balance point, the relay flips and it turns off. It's responding to what the conditions are in your house. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, if something happens and now the temperature is rising and you're 80, 90 degrees in your house, the same mechanism kicks, the relay flips and it turns on a machine whether it's the same one or a different one, but it now conditions the air and lowers the temperature to that set point where it's comfortable. So that is an example of a responsive, adaptive ability that my house has because of this on-off switch to respond to changes that are going on in the house. Now, if we kind of got absurd just a little bit and said, well, what if there was a consequence? What if it got so cold that my pipes froze, the water in the pipes froze, or something? I realize that's a little more extreme, but it's the same concept that the damage could happen to the house if this relay, if this responsive regulatory circuit thing didn't do its job to take me back to balance and keep me in a safe, comfortable zone. Furthermore, let's say that there's something wrong with the regulatory switch, this thermostat, the on-off. It's not working as it was designed. Something's not turning it on or off like it's supposed to. And we're kind of like ignorant to this. We kind of don't know what to do. So if it's too cold, we'll go to the closet and we'll layer up with layers of clothing. We'll put sweaters and jackets and coats and extra socks and blankets, and we'll maybe even have a space heater, and we'll gather around a fireplace, just anything to get warm, right? And if it's too hot, the other extreme, we'll turn a fan on, we'll take layers off, we'll throw water on us. We want to cool down, we want to get comfortable. Well, think of those kind of responses, either direction. Think of those as interventions. Yeah. So now, rather than preventing problems because I have a machine that regulatory manages everything and keeps me or returns me to balance, instead I'm intervening. When something goes wrong, I'm intervening. I've got an intervention. I'm layering up or putting a fan in front of me or something.
But you are dealing with the symptoms.
I'm dealing with the outcomes and the symptoms rather than the core thing. And so I have a phrase that says, awaken the inner doctor. So in the cell, I want to turn on the processes that restore me or put me back into balance. And our objective here isn't necessarily to stay in balance. That's the kind of the irony. It's not to stay in balance as much as it is to be able to return to balance and make my inner doctor stronger, more able, more capable, because we're always going to have these insults, right? These things in life that make us stressed. And that's this redox lifestyle concept. When I go exercise, I'm actually doing damage to my body. This is a stressful thing. My cells don't really like that, and they develop a little bit of oxidation. When I fast, when I go without food, or I simply don't eat carbs, this is kind of the beginning of the whole keto movement, the ketogenic type diet. When I'm not consuming carbohydrates or when I'm outright fasting, my cells think, you're starving me. There's no glucose. What am I going to burn for energy, right? And that's stressful, and that creates a little bit of oxidation in the cell. When I eat good food, the reason why it's good is there are phytonutrients or phytochemicals in them. Some people call them nutraceuticals, but these are chemicals that are made in plants that in their world defend themselves against their predators, that when we eat, they aren't necessarily toxic. We call them subtoxic, but they provoke a mild bit of oxidation in the cell, such that I feel a little bit of stress. Mm-hmm. Well, what is the purpose of exercise and fasting and phytonutrients and so on and so forth? What is that? Because that's lifestyle. What is it? What are they doing that makes me healthier? And the answer is they produce a slight bit of oxidation. We call it mild oxidation in the cell, which alters this redox switch, because now I'm out of balance. You see, I'm either too hot, too cold, but I've got a little bit of oxidation. Mm-hmm. And there's a scientific principle called hormesis, Hormesis. Hormesis is a rule in the cell that says when there's a mild bit of oxidation, the cell is like thinking, if this keeps going, I'm going to be damaged. I could die. I don't know. It's not fun, right? It's stressful. So we've got to do something to respond to that in a way that strengthens me. And these are what we call the survival genes or the longevity genes or whatever, there's a lot of different words for them. But it's a mechanism that turns on my cell defenses. I'm now working to recover and get me back to this ambient, even temperature, if you will, this homeostasis. And so the cell turns on and says, oh, you've given me a little bit of oxidation to deal with because you went out and exercised or you ate this way or whatever. So we're going to turn on these cell defense properties, the processes that will create some antioxidants. They will create some cellular repair. We can rejuvenate and repair. We can clean up damaged molecules. We can clean up DNA that's been damaged, proteins that have been damaged, and we will restore you. And in doing so, you will even be stronger now than you were before. That's why the rest and recovery phase after exercise is so key, is because I'm now repairing and I'm cleaning up the cell because I activated these cell defense mechanisms. So the bottom line of all that is that when through my lifestyle, I am creating this slight bit of it's too hot or too cold, or I've got some oxidation. That's the rules of the cell that kick in, that turn on these responsive capabilities that reset, restore, repair, rejuvenate, kind of rewind and rebuild my cells to be healthier. And that's why this is anti-aging. That's why I can increase my health span or my longevity. It's why I can recover from all of these things, because the symptoms you were referring to, that I now have to put on extra coats, I have to, or fan myself to get back to, a cooler temperature, whatever. Those are interventions. And when I let this persistent out of balance oxidation, if I allow that to persist and become chronic, or if I make it even more exaggerated and now I introduce toxicity, it's not just mild bit of oxidation, it's a lot of oxidation. I'm way too hot or way too cold. Then I need to go to see a physician and have intervention. I need to intervene with a drug, and thankfully they're there. But I need to intervene with some kind of an agent that will come in and be a drug now, or a surgery, or some kind of intervention that will get me back to what we call health. So I really simply just want to turn on my own capability to recover. I want to awaken that interdoctor. I want to make that regulatory redox switch functional. So I consume tiny molecules that provide a mild oxidative stimulus that cascade throughout the body, that has a universal effect on every cell of the body, that affects these thermostats, these on and off redox switches. They're redox sensitive switches that activate this reparative cell protective mechanism that's already in there that restores me to balance. That's in essence what redox signaling molecules are. And it's part of the lifestyle. And it's this biohack that says, you probably should be exercising and eating right, and exercising, stress reduction, and sleeping right, and so on. I mean, that's all part of our lifestyle modification. But now I can add these redox signaling molecules that will directly turn these switches on at will, like on command. On demand, I can make them functional, and I can turn the thermostat, reset the thermostat, make them more efficient and more functional, like they were when I was younger, when I hadn't gone through, 20 or 50 years of whatever, that kind of ran me down. And now I'm older, and these processes, these switches are not, they're not as responsive as maybe they used to be.
That was my question. I was getting ready to say, why, if our body is capable of producing this on its own, that inner doctor we are born with. The body is a brilliant machine that takes care of many things without us even knowing. Like we pumping blood, we don't do anything for it. Our heart is pumping and we don't do anything for it. So why would we need to supplement these redox molecules when we already have them in us?
Well, it's important to know that these are native. They're part of our immune system functioning. Okay, that's what redox. A redox is a contraction word that means reduction oxidation, and that's just the movement of an electron. I'll come back to that if you remind me in a minute. But to your point, this is the difference between lifespan and health span. Because you can kind of think of, we all kind of show up at age, whatever, 40, 50, 60, and we start dying, but we're not dead. You know, it's like we if we had a crystal ball and we knew that you were going to die on your 75th birthday, just to be arbitrary here, if we knew that was the end for you, or me, I mean, what I would want would be to be healthy without needing intervention until my 74th year, 360th day. You know, it's like, okay, then get sick and die, right? If I knew that. But what happens is we start dying when we're 50 or 45 or whatever. And we use interventions and surgery and body part replacements and so forth to keep us going so that we can claim, yeah, I'm healthy, right? I take all these drugs and I'm now healthy, right? Correct. It's like, no, you started dying a long time ago and we're just propping you up. We're keeping you going with the interventions until that absolute time. So we just, as we get older and we get past puberty, which most people listening to this are going to say, yeah, that happened a long time ago. These functionalities become less effective. Our body just doesn't function like it used to. We still have signaling. I mean, inflammation is signaling. It's all redox. It's just the movement of electrons. But our reparative, our cell defense, our longevity, our survival genes aren't being expressed as much. And we're experiencing more of the negative signaling, the inflammatory signaling that produces downstream diseases from that. The need to put on the extra coats or to start fanning yourself because I can't get back to balance as well anymore. I can't defend myself.
Is it because that signal is getting quieter and quieter also? More
confused, more toxic, there's just more things, and I've accumulated more. I'm retaining more. My elimination pathways aren't working as bright. There's more oxidation in my brain, so my neurodegenerative processes start, to be challenged and so forth. So let me go back and this is a little bit of the chemistry of the electrons. Everybody says this is just electrons moving. So let me just give you a quick example. If we went out into your backyard and we lit a campfire, we're going to go cook in the backyard or we just start a fire in the fireplace, or you turn on your gas stove and you watch the burner light up, right? The question is, why does that happen? Why do we have fire, right? Well, the point is the sun is photosynthesizing with photons all the plant matter that grows around us. It's storing energy. It's storing electrons in the plant matter. And it's stored in the form of glucose and cellulose and wood, or whatever the plant matter is. So it's stored there. These electrons are locked in that, and we call that a reduced state, meaning it's full of electrons. So it's reduced. It's not reactive. Mm-hmm. When we come along and we light a match to it, or we turn the burner on and we put a spark on it, and it flames up, okay, it requires oxygen to receive the electrons. The electrons are moving or oxidizing from the fuel source, whatever it is, to the oxygen molecule, and the oxygen takes the electron away. But in the movement of the electron, there's a thing that happens called heat. There's energy that's created in that as the electrons move. Well, if we took all the oxygen away from your campfire, the fire immediately goes out. You have to have oxygen because it's the movement of these electrons. So now think of the body. We eat this plant matter either directly or through an animal, and they already pre-processed some of it, but we're eating this, and we're eating these, if you will, these electrons. We're storing them now. and in the form of glucose or fatty acids or protein, amino acids, whatever. We eat this stuff that came from the sun. It's now in us, and we're storing it. In our cells, we have a little machine or a little fireplace, if you will, called the mitochondria, and it takes the glucose and the fatty acids and the proteins, and it burns them through a chemical process. It's not like a spark in an open flame, but it's still combusting, metabolizing that fuel source. There's electrons in the glucose that transfer from the fuel source to oxygen, and in the movement of that electron, energy is created. And that's what powers me. That's what keeps me going, okay, is the energy that we're creating at the cellular level, because I'm metabolizing, I'm combusting this fuel source, and the energy is created when the electron moves. But I have to have oxygen. If I took all my oxygen away, I would die, because that process immediately, it's like putting the fire out. So oxygen then becomes the core central thing, because with it, it acts like a catcher's mitt to receive the electrons. And it's very electronegative, so the electrons want to go toward it. That's what makes the process happen. Historically, what happens is that oxygen molecule, not all of it, not 100% of it, are reduced themselves, and they remain oxidized or oxidants. And for decades, we have taken antioxidants to put the fire out, to squelch the fire so it doesn't damage us internally. Right. We don't want oxidation in that sense. And so we've got a multi-billion-dollar industry that's grown up around this idea of putting out the fire, of reducing the oxidants with these available electrons that I can get from vitamins, okay? Mm-hmm. Well, what we found with this ASEA discovery is that some of those reactive molecules, we call them reactive oxygen species, some of these reactive molecules are, think of what we were just talking about a few minutes ago, these are what causes this mild bit of oxidation in the cell. It's a redox state. And that's what triggers or turns on these genes that restore me to health. So we have built into us, into the rules of the cell, a kind of an automated system that says, when you give me just a little bit of oxidation, however you do that, just even living and breathing and eating and running or fasting or whatever, or through a biohack, when you create a little bit of oxidation, I'm going to activate some genes that will turn on and make you stronger. Mm-hmm. And so my point is this is a very native, natural, this lives very naturally in our cells, and it's the discovery of this is how the cell works. We're not doing anything magical. We're just saying this is biologically how cells think. And when they have a mild bit of oxidation, they have to obey this rule of hormesis that activates gene expressions across the board. It's universal. All of the redox sensitive thermostats, or we call them transcription factors, they kick on, they respond, they rebalance, and they turn off. And that happens zillions of times. And we're just tapping into it with these redox signaling molecules. And that's why this is so fun. I love explaining. Hopefully that wasn't too deep.
I love to listen to you. You have a really great way of talking about it. And as you talk, questions come to my mind. It was like, when somebody listens to this and still thinks, can this possibly work for me? Because I know it worked for his wife, and I know it works for him, and it works for him. But what if it doesn't work for me?
So here's my response. They always work. These are the rules of the cell. You provide these, you satisfy these rules, they work. Now, what doesn't work sometimes is our own definition of what does work mean. Because I have a drug mindset. I'm used to interventions. When I take a drug, it can make my pain go away, and it can do it in 30 minutes, right? When I take a drug, it can fix my whatever, my blood pressure, you name it. I mean, that's what the intervention is for. So there's usually kind of a measurable thing or indicator that says it's working, right?
Mhm.
It would be like saying, well, if I take aspirin for my headache and it doesn't work, what we're saying is it didn't take away 100% of my headache. But did it take 50% of it away? I don't know. I mean, you're the judge of that, but does that mean it's not working? Well, my point is it always works. It's scientifically impossible for this not to work. But what can vary is maybe how much I need. Everybody has a different set point because I have different history. I have different medical issues, right?
Collection of medical issues, yes.
Right. And that's kind of also it's about hormesis. It's like you might require a little bit more or less to effectively change this situation, the way the cells respond.
And also the age
Mhm.
and the lifestyle that the person have.
Yeah, and you could have all this toxicity already have built up. You're full of this stuff, of toxicity, and it might take longer or it might take more initially for you to get past that log jam, if you will. And so that's why I always caution people to say, let's make sure that we've discussed your expectations first.
Yes.
And I usually do that by saying if you are particularly unhealthy, if you've got a lot of issues health-wise, you might want to double or triple up on this for the first month or two, or it's going to take longer. You didn't get sick in a month. It took you years to get to this point where you're suddenly needing. It takes years before you finally, I mean, you don't feel high blood sugar.
Yes.
You don't feel high blood pressure. You are told that you have it when you have a lab test. And you're going, oh, I didn't know that. But it takes a while because it took years to get to that point of metabolic imbalance, of metabolic disease processes going on. So when you do anything like this, you have to have that reasonable expectation and just say, I'm doing, I mean, what if you never felt it? Could you rest assured that you were preventing? I mean, there's another angle to this. So anyway, bottom line is I tell people not to get too worked up over that. This at least is a preventive thing. It always works. You might need more. And in fact, it might work so well that you will know it works because it makes you feel worse to start with. You might be detoxing. Suddenly your cells have the ability to get rid of all these toxic, whatever, molecules. And you can't eliminate them fast enough. You're still, things aren't working like they need, and you might need to slow down. You might just need to acclimate longer. Everybody's got a different thing. So it always works.
There's also one thing that I would like to touch on, and you may want to talk to it. When somebody comes to you with a certain issue that they have on their mind, that they would like this to work for, but it's not always the decision of the person where the molecule starts to work first. It may, I have read somebody online said, well, but I didn't lose weight. I was like, well, this doesn't claim to be weight loss product. But it's people have, like you said, the mindset and the expectations are so important, because we take vitamins. Do I feel that I'm doing something for my body? No, I take vitamins because I believe they will help me or prevent things.
Exactly.
And exactly like you said, I have my own personal experience within first week of taking Redox, but then I didn't feel anything. But then a few months later, I had my blood work done, and I realized my cholesterol went down 60 points without medication, without any change in my lifestyle. And I have been talked to for several years that I need to go on statins, and I didn't want to. It on its own balanced itself out. So, like, to your point, you don't feel you have higher cholesterol, and you don't feel when it lowered down. It just does. And it showed on the blood work.
Yeah, and we have to be really careful in these discussions because, here's the disclaimer is that this is a supplement. We don't claim to treat or diagnose or prevent anything. What we're doing is turning on the mechanisms that awaken the inner doctor. We're just making the cell more responsive so that it can affect this gene expression, these gene pathways. That's what we're doing. And if some people will say, well, it targets the problem areas. You know, like women would say, will it target my cellulite? And it's like, I don't know. It's going to every cell in your body, even your hair cell, whatever your hair follicles are. You know, my wife made it was after she was going on this a while. She says, I think I need to see the eye doctor. I've got these dark lines around my eyes and I can't get rid of them. And 2 or 3 days later, she came laughing to me and she said, no, we don't need to. I just realized that my eyelashes are growing back. So it's turning cells on all over. It didn't target, you know, her eyelash follicles.
Right.
It's not targeting your cellulite or your joints. You know, that's not the point. It's universal. It affects all cells. And if a group of cells or an organ or what some physiological, you know, system is already impaired, well, it will help them function better. But I can't tell you that that's going to result in any list of things, you know, that you could hopefully do it and see, you know. But you should be you should be eating right and sleeping right and fasting and exercising and stress reduce. You should be doing all that anyway, you know. And you can't just use this or any biohack and say, well, I'm just going to do this and sit on the couch with my remote and watch people exercise. You know, it's like, no, you got to, this is an adjunct. It's assisting you doing what you should already be doing.
When you taking supplements, when you're taking steps into better health, how Redox play to it? Does it improve the effect of all of you taking already in your body? Does it make it work better?
I mean, you could technically argue the cell doesn't know the origin of these redox signaling molecules. It doesn't know whether you ate a vitamin to get that or whether you exercised. You know, from a strict physiological biochemistry. All it knows is that there is a slight bit of oxidation that turned the switch on. How you got there, you can get there through other pathways as well, which is lifestyle. What we're saying is that with a sea of redox signaling molecules, I can do it like that. I can put it on board and create that state, and I can maintain that and keep it functioning at a level. And yes, I should be doing all these other things because there's other aspects to health. There's strength, there's mobility in joints, you know, there's other things that create inflammation. You need to eat right. I talk about when I presented at the ASEA conference, the medical meeting in Vegas last, I talked about a concept called Redox Clean. And it's like, you can eat garbage and toxicity and pesticides and on, and you can muck up the system. You can make them, you know, I think of contaminant or something, that you're just not clean. It's not smooth flowing because you're onloading things that gum up the works. Yeah. Well, that's going to impair if you're not living a healthy lifestyle and you say, well, I'll just sit there on the couch and drink this stuff and that'll fix everything. It's like, that's not the whole picture. This is an adjunct, and it's a very powerful one.
Going back to you personally, when you learn all that, when you saw your wife turning around within 48 hours, which is insane after decades and decades of declining, when you saw on yourself that it has effect, you start noticing things that affected you. What was the turning point for you when you said, oh my God, this is worth spreading around? Everybody needs to know about this.
The answer to that is that the answers live in your head and your gut. You know, intellectually, you can know a lot and be knowledgeable and so forth, but that doesn't mean you're going to go do anything.
There's one thing that I would like to touch on, because this product is not comparable to anything that is on the market right now. How so?
You say, why is it not comparable?
How is it sitting on its own, kind of?
Well, it's a new category because it's regulated by supplement rules in the United States, in the FDA. It's not a drug. It was originally, people can watch the Genesis video, you know, on their own and and see the backstory as to why this became technically a supplement in the FDA. But it is a new category because it doesn't intervene. It's not a molecule that is finding a receptor site like a drug has to, you see. So it's a different class, and it really has no equal. And it's protected by, everybody thinks that it's all this patent protection. It's like, yeah, there's some good patents, but patents are also publicly disclosed. You just can't copy them for a number of years.
Yeah.
But it's the trade secrets that make this tight. It's the trade secrets. It's like you can't duplicate this process. To be able to stabilize reactive molecules, those reactive oxygen species, after you electrolyze them, to be able to stabilize those, to create a shelf life so that you have a product. I mean, making electrolyzed molecules is not hard at all. You can buy home units that do that. I've got one in my closet. That's not the point. You make them and they perish almost immediately.
Yeah.
You have a short shelf life with them, so there's no product there. But to make them in their pure form and to make them stable, that's the key. And nobody can, in my opinion, will be able to do that for a very, very, very long time. So we do stand apart. We are unique because we have the science, we understand it, and it is a considerable ramp up time for anybody to come along and say, well, we're going to duplicate. It's like they have a lot of tough sledding ahead of them if they think they're going to do that. So in the meantime, we're the standard. We own Redox. We own the space that is unique and is a new category. And that's because of that, it's like you don't have competition. I mean, what a unique place to be in. You know, we're going to start a business that has no competition and everybody needs.
And literally everybody needs. Yeah.
You know, we're not just talking about we have a fancy new makeup. Well, number one, only women are going to want that. And number two, only the people that are into makeup want that. I mean, you start, the market becomes, no, we have what, 8 billion people that each have, 70 trillion cells. It's like everybody
can benefit from
redox signaling and to do it better. And so it's a wonderful marketplace, and we are unique in that regard.
And one thing that I believe is also unique is that is native to our body, which means nobody can be allergic to it.
Yeah.
That cannot be said to about any other product on the market either.
Yeah, we often call that it's transparent to medication, but because it's native, it has no toxic ability. And we knew that from the original biotech company that was trying to become a drug. That's why they couldn't become a drug, is because they couldn't kill anything. Ironically, they couldn't get a lethal dose.
Or anybody.
Yeah.
Wow, isn't it sad state of drug industry? Dr. Ostler, this was absolutely fantastic discussion. I'm so grateful to you. And we took so much longer than was planned, but I hope you don't mind. And I hope our listeners wouldn't mind, because this was a source of wisdom on your part to kind of introduce to people that never heard of it, how significant this thing is.
Well, just tell your listeners to pop some popcorn. This is better than Netflix.
For sure. For sure. But is there one thing that you would like to say goodbye with? One thing that you would like to stay with people to take away from this?
Yeah, I think that the takeaway, is back to this simplicity, the simpleness of the concept of on both sides now. The goal here is you want to awaken your inner doctor. That's the goal. I mean, everybody has a different starting place. This doesn't make us immortal. We're not going to live forever. But what we want is to have a healthy health span, a healthy lifestyle.
You are extremely productive man. They always say, ask those busy people to do more, and they always do. You are incredible.
Just drink lots of Acia.
Yeah. Yes.
Makes me sharp.
We only, and I can tell you, after my third surgery that I had back in 2008 or 9, I believe, I was left with significant sciatica nerve pain going down to my left leg. I was not able to sit for 40 minutes. I was not able to drive long distances. I was not able to sit through a movie or dinner with a friend without shifting in my chair, getting up or doing something. We are now on for an hour and a half. Did you notice that I didn't shift once? It's a big deal to me.
Well, again, we should probably conclude with a disclaimer that, you know, we don't.
I always do.
Yeah, good. I'll let you do it then.
I always do. I have it either under my show every time. This
Good.
is not, we are not talking about something that is designed to cure, heal, or prevent anything. We are turning, by the words of Dr. Ostler, turning our inner doctor in. That's all we are doing. And it's not a salt water.
That's correct. And you know, people that get hung up on that, the saline is just the carrier vehicle for the reactive molecules that are suspended in it.
And that's what exactly body makes it from.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Vera, I have thoroughly enjoyed this.
Thank you so much for giving me so much time. It was very generous of you. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Well, let me just encourage everybody. Let me encourage everybody who's listening now or later, you know, to get with the person that invited you here. Come listen to us every Friday night at 8 p.m. Central on Discover ASEA. We do the ASEA 5. We talk with health professionals and business people. Do your due diligence, and you know, you have nothing to lose. Maybe except a sore body. I don't know. So.
And also, if you really are a little nut for science, make sure you seek these 2 books.
Yeah, those are at redoxmatters.com, but thank you for the plug.
I love them thoroughly. If you remember our first meeting in Vegas when I asked you to sign it for me, there was a several pages twisted because I keep going back to it referenced. You have done fabulous job for somebody like me who needed some proof, and not only, you know, what it did for me, but I wanted to see that there's science behind it. I wanted to see that I can trust it, and you have done that for me. And see, there's there's stuff. I'm using it as my textbook. So, and there's plenty of research materials about redox. This is something that is most kind of consumable for me, because many people need to understand why it works and how it works in the body in able to make that leap. You were into biochemistry at the beginning, and you ended up there. Unplanned trip.
That's just how life works. You know, biologically and in a lot of other ways. What we've done prepares us for where we're at.
Thank you so much again. I was so grateful that you gave me so much time. And
thank you.
Have a wonderful rest of the day.
I will. Thank you. Bye-bye.